here to introduce a startup. Hey, startup, anyone? Hey. Right, thank you. Limp-wristed sort of startup chat there. Yeah, so my startup is called Native CSS, and I'm introducing the concept of native apps and CSS styling. Cool. So firstly, you may not be aware of the perils of building apps. There are perils of building apps. First is the learning curve. If you sit a developer down to play with an Android or iOS app, they'll be there for weeks and come up with rubbish. I know, I've done it. And I've managed people who do that. Standardization. So this is a problem kind of unique to native development over web development, which is if you've got two parts of your app which you want to be the same, how do you standardize the view over many parts of your app? And it's quite hard. And if you do one, you always forget the other. And one we all know about mobile development is fragmentation. Sure, it works on a tablet. Does it work on your new iPhone 5? Does it work on your tiny new Pebble screen or whatever the hell people put on their faces nowadays? So yeah, next thing is limited reuse. I actually advise when I do new code bases to just give up on reuse. It's just too hard to bother with. This is where this sort of styling engine particularly helps, because when code and style are interweaved, you create lots of complexity. Right, so the final thing everybody hates is customer UAT. Who hates customer UATs? That's one big hating man at the back there. I hate customer UATs. Although mine go really well, and I never have any crashes or any sort of lots of dangerous screaming. Cool, so I'm going to introduce native CSS now. So what is native CSS? Native CSS says make iPhone and Android apps natively, and then stick a CSS file in to do the styling. So this is important from separating code and UI from, levels, which gives you lots of architectural benefits. Cool. So I know some people here will be thinking, is it Phonegap? No, it's not Phonegap. Phonegap has HTML5. Anyone with HTML5? Or as developers call HTML5, HTML. It also has JavaScript in it. And I think HTML5 and JavaScript are just a little bit too complicated for what you could be doing natively, which is faster. So as this graceful transition will suggest, it's not a web framework, it is lightweight, just CSS. And that's my logo on the right. So now that you've got a little bit of the gist of how this is a mobile framework to help you make native mobile apps without HTML and without JavaScript, let's see a little bit how it works with CSS and what are the pleasures of CSS. First pleasure of CSS is UI learning curve. Sit down and read a CSS tutorial, you'll get it in minutes. Does anybody disagree? No? Oh, well, silence. Standardization. You see that button there? You can style that button across all your apps. All your views with the same bit of CSS. Very easy to be consistent throughout your app. Next thing is fragmentation. Everybody knows in CSS you can use a media query to handle it on a device or a small screen and so on. You can use that in Phonegap, but now you can use it with native views. So the next benefit is reuse. So that is the same code for the app on the left, and I just applied a different style sheet to it. So it's quite a significant change you can do here just by changing a CSS file. And obviously it makes customer UAT a lot nicer, which we'll get into in the live demo, well, recorded demo, whatever. The next thing I'm going to mention is personalization. So this, by being CSS, it can actually make it dynamic and live. So you can live edit your apps anytime, anywhere. You can sort of edit as you go. And one of the benefits of that, of like dynamic runtime styling, is it's really easy to personalize. So you can put in a layer of styling specific to some users, and it's very easy to do that. Anyway, now for the demo. And I've subtitled this demo, A Story of Native CSS and the Ever-Demanding CEO. Right. Turn on display mirroring. Cool, so this is how you make Android apps. This is IntelliJ on the left. Does anyone use IntelliJ? A few. Not known as Eclipse. And on the right, we've got a Samsung emulator. I know the resolution's rubbish. It just is. I recorded it on a MacBook Retina. Oh, the whims. So we've got a tiny Samsung emulator on the right there. So if you don't know much about Android development, it basically falls down to 2 files for your most simple app. Didn't I hit play there? There we go. We've got 2 files on the left, a form XML, an XML file, and a code file. The XML file is how I see HTML. So if we have a quick look in the form XML, you go, hang on, we've got some tags going on here, but are really complicated. And I want you to pay particular attention to the names of these tags. So put your HTML brain on, and then at the top, that thing says frame layout. Think that as a div. You see this edit text there, think that as an input. So you've got an input called email, and you've got a div called form. You see it says ID form. And this corresponds to the view on the right. So you've got the 2 inputs at the top. I think the top one's email, and you've got the box around that, which is the div called form. So I think this goes back to when you make an app with something like Phonegap, you're actually just ignoring, you've got all this XML here, which defines your view. So you're doing loads of levels here, and it's kind of confusing. Anyway, let's skip on. So this is the XML file, and now we're going to have a quick look at the activity, which is the Java class which kicks it all off. And you can integrate native CSS. It's all about clean integration in 8 lines, and most of that's boilerplate. So let's just have a quick look at that zoomed out. We've got a URL here, a local URL, which loads in a CSS file, and then it styles that. So it's just a couple of methods here, boring stuff, pulls in a URL and styles the app. So now let's have a look at the CSS file. The CSS file at the moment is empty. This is the CSS file which this app on the right is expecting to see. So let's firstly paste in what I call a style guide. So you see, you might not see that, but on the right something's appeared on the emulator. Let's have a quick look. You can see email. So what it's done is it's telling you, the native CSS is telling you how to style this app with CSS. So we've got a little hash there of hash email. Great. You can now throw that into your CSS, hash email, and start styling it. As you can see, it's come up for all of those now. Let's ignore the style guide and take that away for a sec. So you may be wondering, where's the story? You promised me a story of like developer versus CEO. You can't just hold my hopes so high and trash them. But oh yes, now it's the story. So you're in a startup. Your boss comes over and says, we want to be the next Facebook. And you go, yeah, sure. We've got an app ready to roll, next Facebook. So I copy in my branding and paste it in. And bang, we've got our Facebook branding for our login screen. And he's like, oh yeah, no, that's great. So then your boss comes along and he goes, well, it works fine for the Samsung emulator, but I bought a new tablet and an Acss 4. You're like, okay, well I was going to keep them to the side, but we'll pull up the tab and the Acss 4, and I'll just keep running. He then goes, oh right, well I need to be focusing on this. Right. So you've seen there the learning curve for the CSS, pulling it back to the slides a bit. It's quite a simple learning curve. And now we're going to focus a little bit on the standardization. So you spotted here, I'm going to go to in the CSS, I've got an input, I hope that's big enough for everyone, and you can define in this input area the width of all the input elements, which in HTML world and CSS world means email, password, and the login button. So if you want to change all those elements like this, bang, you can just do that live editing in your native apps, which is new. So you play around with that for a bit, work out the style. So good for standards. So your boss has got his Galaxy tablet, and he goes, oh, it looks rubbish in the Galaxy tablet. Look at it, I can almost fit my super long secure password in there. And so you go, okay, let's use a standard media query to change the width of these input views. So bang, we just paste that in. No, I'm not restarting on any of this. The slowest thing about development is constantly restarting. So I'm playing around there with the views, that's all good, but there's a problem. You're about to release the app. It gets to legals. Legals go, what are you doing? You can't use Facebook branding. Oh no, how do we get this far? Oh no, how are we going to do it? Can we do it without restarting the app? Yeah, we can. I'm going to go into funky.css and paste in a new brand. Facebook's tired. Let's just paste this white. We've got our fabulous new funky branding there. So it's all going pretty well. You've dealt with fragmentation and you've merely reused your existing app for new styling. And that gets on to UAT. So UAT is really important. You know, it's 1:45. The iOS guys have come along. I did mention it was iOS as well, I think. So you're sat there, it's 1:45. I'll just say it's midnight. It's midnight. Customers there screaming, yeah, sure, what's the problem? And then the usability guy kicks up. Oh, you can't use red. You can't use red on your input field. Red means no. Does it? Oh, I didn't know that. So he says he wants to make it green. You're like, well, how can we make it green? Well, I'll just paste that in there, make it all green, lovely, lovely. What's next? What's the problem? Right, we've done that. The final step is personalization. So I'm just going to tag this one on the end here. So you've got UK sales are down or something like that, and you don't want to re-release your app to fix the problem. So in your CSS, which can be hosted anywhere, you decide to paste in some extra CSS, like say only for the British users. So you paste that in, which updates all the flags here, which is meant to indicate a sort of personalization level. Anyway, that's my demo. And back to the slides. Turn off. Yes. Final slide. Thank you. There's my business card. Any questions? Hey!